let's dive right into one of the weirdest cases to ever come out of a small American town. A story where one family came face to face with a creature that seems like it was ripped straight out of a nightmare.
And that right there, that was the unbelievable claim from the very first witness. It kicks off a story that's going to involve strange tracks, a full-blown town-wide panic, and a mystery that honestly still lingers to this day. So our story begins on the night of April 25th, 1973. We're in Enfield, Illinois, at the home of a man named Henry McDaniel.
So picture this. It's about 9:30 at night. McDaniel gets home and his kids are totally freaked out, saying something was scratching at the front door. A few moments later, he hears it himself. He grabs his .22 pistol, swings the door open, and sees this thing. It's bizarre, wobbling out from the bushes on three legs. Thinking it's some kind of threat, he fires a shot right at it, but it does absolutely nothing. The creature then takes off, covering about 75 feet in just 3 giant hops before disappearing down by the railroad tracks. So what did he see exactly? Well, his description was just wild. He said it was 4 to 5 feet tall, had grayish skin, glowing red eyes, and yes, 3 legs. And it moved with this weird, distinctive hop. When the police finally arrived, the creature was long gone, of course. But they did find one piece of evidence, a clue that just made this whole thing even stranger. Right, so the creature itself has vanished. But that doesn't mean there wasn't anything left behind. In fact, investigators found the very first piece of physical proof. The officers discovered tracks near the house. And get this, they had 6 toe pads. Now, that might not sound like a huge deal, but almost every mammal you can think of has 5. This one small detail was a massive anomaly. And right as they're trying to figure out these weird tracks, another shocking report comes in, this time from a 10-year-old neighbor named Greg Garrett, who claimed he'd been attacked by this same creature earlier that day. And what's crazy is, Garrett's description was a perfect match for what McDaniel saw. The height, the color, the red eyes, everything. But he added this terrifying new detail. He claimed the creature actually attacked him and completely shredded his shoes. The story doesn't even stop there. About a week later, some investigators from a local radio station actually managed to get a recording of the beast. So, what does a 3-legged monster sound like? Well, eyewitnesses called it a blood-curdling howl. A cryptozoologist who got to hear the tape later said it was unlike any animal sound he'd ever heard before. Now, investigators tried to rationalize it. They thought, okay, could it be a local animal? You know, a red fox can make some pretty terrifying screams, and so can a barn owl. But none of them seemed to be a perfect match for that blood-curdling sound everyone was describing. So now you have multiple sightings, weird tracks, and audio evidence. The news spread like wildfire, and pretty soon the entire town of Enfield began to panic. And I'm not exaggerating. This was a tiny community, only about 400 people. The fear got so intense that some locals decided they needed to take matters into their own hands. You get this group of 5 young guys calling themselves the Enfield Vigilante Squad. I'm not kidding. Their grand plan apparently was to get some guns, some alcohol, and just drive around town shooting at things. One of them even claimed he shot the creature, but it's far more likely they were just causing chaos. Unsurprisingly, the whole squad was quickly arrested. After all that commotion, the police basically told Henry McDaniel to stop talking to the press. And just like that, the sightings stopped for almost 50 years. But you know how these stories are. Just when it feels like it's become a dusty old piece of folklore, the legend reappeared. Fast forward with me to 2022. A man named Zach Stark was driving near Enfield when something darted across the highway in front of him. His description is going to give you chills. He said it was about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, had dark gray skin, and, here's the kicker, it had what he described as a tripod setup of the legs. It was an eerily similar report to the original. This modern encounter just reignites the whole question, what in the world have people been seeing all these years? So, over the decades, as you can imagine, several theories have emerged to try and make sense of the 3-legged terror of Enfield. Okay, first you've got the hoax theory. This one gained a lot of steam when Greg Garrett, the 10-year-old kid, admitted years later that he made up a story about being attacked because he wanted a new pair of shoes. But Henry McDaniel never, ever changed his story. In fact, he was convinced it was an alien. He said it was not from this planet. Then there's the idea of an escaped circus animal, maybe some genetically unusual creature from a train on those nearby tracks. But the most prominent theory, the one people really debate, points to a specific animal that's very, very far from home. So let's talk about the kangaroo theory. At first glance, it seems to explain a lot, right? The strange hopping movement? Check. The 4 to 5 foot height? Check. And that mysterious third leg? Well, that could easily be a kangaroo's massive, powerful tail, which they use for balance. It fits! But it's not a perfect theory. Those tracks with 6 pads are a major mismatch. And the biggest counterpoint of all? Henry McDaniel. He was a military veteran, he said he had seen kangaroos before, and he was absolutely firm that whatever he saw in his yard that night was not a kangaroo.
So, after looking at all the sightings, the evidence, and the different theories, what's the most logical explanation for this decades-old mystery?
When you really boil it all down, the most likely culprit does seem to be an escaped kangaroo. I mean, just put yourself in that situation for a second. It's the middle of the night in rural Illinois, you're startled, and you see this animal that's completely out of place. It's easy to see how a kangaroo's strange appearance and powerful tail could be perceived as something monstrous and otherworldly. But here's the thing. Even if a kangaroo explains what happened in 1973, what about that sighting from just a few years ago? Ultimately, the story of the Enfield Monster is a powerful reminder of how a single strange event can become a legend that just haunts a community for generations. The most likely explanation is probably a kangaroo, but those inconsistencies in that recent sighting leave just enough room for doubt. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else might be lurking out there in the shadows?